All right. My name is Szulc. For those of you who don't know me, we're going to have a great session this afternoon around experience architecture. Now, just to set the scene, a few people have asked, is this a technical session? No, it's not. We're going to be talking about great ways to think about content. And we're going to do this in two halves. The first part will be, we have special guests from Virgin Airlines and Velocity to talk about how they build their campaigns and how they work together. It's really exciting content. It's a panel. And then we're going to have Andrew Clarke from Adobe to go through some of the foundation capabilities that you really need to consider to make sure that your content engine is ready to then move forward into a velocity engine and a personalization story. So it's great content. So let's get started. If we can go switch over to the first deck and let's introduce our guests. So joining me on the stage, the team from Virgin and Velocity. That was a really smooth transition. So guys, let me introduce Adi and Drew from Virgin and Simon and Jonathan from Velocity. So guys, welcome.
Thank you.
So Simon, let's start with you. We're going to do this in a panel format. You spoke at last year's Symposium and you talked about Adobe Campaign. Can you tell us a little bit about where you've gone from there? How's it going?
Sure, we've had an amazing 12 months, Mark, and a lot of fun. And it culminated in us winning the Umbrella Marketing Team of the Year. Our partners at CHE Proximity have put together a great video that really does sum it up. So we thought we might take a look at that just to get things started.
Look at this button. This button is a brand ad. How is this button a brand ad? Well, at Virgin Australia's Velocity Frequent Flyer, every time we engage with our 8 million members is an opportunity to make a brand ad. So this button, yeah, it's a brand ad. This Wi-Fi password is a brand ad. This personalised email, definitely a brand ad. This brand ad had a typo in it, giving away 1 billion points instead of 1 million. It created nationwide hysteria, which we documented and turned into a 40-part mini-series, all brand ads. When data revealed our members were using points to buy unromantic Valentine's gifts, our CEO called them up.
Hello?
Hello, Garrett.
Re-gifted their points and turned them into brand ads.
You purchased, with your points, a nose hair trimmer.
Every brand ad we made let our members experience our unique tone and personality. Like this world's biggest and only ever Points Expo brand ad that proved points are better used on holidays with us than toasters with other reward programs.
Only at the expo.
And this fancy yacht-looking brand ad, which asked the entire population how much they earned. We even let more partners than ever put our brand ads in their windows. So now you can earn Velocity points on everything from soy lattes to cucumbers to credit cards to home loans. And because all those brand ads use data and media smarts to serve over 50 million unique messages based on what we wanted people to do, we rebuilt our entire digital presence so it knew who it was talking to, and created this blog that knew, well, a lot of stuff. So you could say it's been a pretty big year for the country's favourite frequent flyer programme, because we didn't just make one big shiny brand ad, we made millions of them.
Hula!
It's a great video.
Oh, round of applause.
So Jonathan, tell us what you're up to now.
Yeah, so as you can see from the video, it's been a pretty busy year across the Virgin Australia group. At Velocity in particular, we've embarked on our digital transformation journey. So we've implemented AEM and started to build new digital products. 12 months ago, we defined our digital transformation agenda with 4 pillars. The first was to make it easy for partners to do business with us. The second was to increase our member value and engagement. The third was to unlock our first-party data to really drive performance marketing. And the fourth was to create scale-based innovation. And the reason we've got this slide up here is the whole thing really started with the 1 billion point giveaway campaign that you've just seen on the video. We worked with Adobe to use AEM for the first time and Audience Manager to create an innovative and interactive campaign landing page And the landing page really allowed us, with that Billion Points campaign back in May 2017, to prove the ROI of the software and really road test AEM before we purchased it, which was a key point for us to be able to prove the value of digital transformation to our board and actually unlock the budget to do that. So right now we're in full migration mode into AEM. We've done part of our website, we've got a bit more to come. And we've also launched our new native app, our iOS app. So if you haven't downloaded the Velocity app and you're on iOS, please do. And really working closely with our colleagues at VA and really shifting our marketing strategy to capitalize on personalization of our experiences.
And I think as a group, we've reached a high level of maturity in our use of Adobe Campaign to orchestrate our campaigns and outbound automation. But now, as we transform our digital experience, we're taking that opportunity to evolve our strategy and move towards one-to-one personalisation. And there's really two key changes involved. First, we're moving from those one-off siloed campaign executions to focus on automated cross-channel experiences. And then to enable that, we're moving to very much an audience-centric approach, so placing our guests and our members at the heart of the experience.
Great. And Drew, tell us about Virgin Australia.
Yeah, so we were on stage probably about 2 years ago. We were at Symposium, and then we were talking a lot about putting the right foundation in place and really building from there. At that stage, we kind of analytics, audience manager, and target, and we're just finishing up the campaign implementation along with Velocity. And from there, that infrastructure has really driven a lot of that activity across the group. So having a shared structure and a shared foundation, it has really enabled both teams to kind of grow and run those campaigns. So the infrastructure that we have now in place with those products really is allowing us to scale across all our channels, and not just for the Velocity members, but also non as well.
Great. So, when we talk about key building blocks, we often talk about data and content and, how we put the two together to drive personalization and strategy. Can you tell me a bit about your approach?
Yeah, look, for us, it's, as mentioned earlier, it's paramount that we develop better ways to understand our Velocity members as well as non-Velocity guests as well. And to do that, we need to develop a single digital customer record. So it's quite refreshing to see what the journey Adobe's going with, the kind of the experience kind of record. And that allows us to kind of collect, store, and activate across all the channels. Once again, we need to ensure that we can work to kind of have that common taxonomy across the whole organisation, and that's allowed us to do that kind of that data sharing between the teams. So as a kind of a performance media kind of lead in the airline, having the Velocity data at kind of the fingertips and made available in Audience Manager is it's a goldmine, and it really helps us kind of create lookalike audiences and new ways of segmenting to supplement out all of our media campaigns. No worries, mate.
So obviously you understand your audiences a lot better and it helps with the targeting, but tell me a bit about the creative process. Like, do you create a campaign and then create variants, or do you create variants from the start? How does that look?
Yeah, so we create variants from the start, which is probably what a lot of people in the room do. We typically look at life stage data, which influences people's travel behaviour, as well as past booking data as well. We use this to drive more relevant, engaging creative, and then once we start a campaign, we continue to optimise it throughout so that we're continuing to drive performance.
And likewise at Velocity, the start point for us is working with talk data scientists to define segments within the campaign audience, and then it's over to our CX architects, and they design an experience for each segment, and that really informs the creative brief. So those variations of the experience are defined from the outset. And that's requiring us to really revisit our operating model, our briefing and delivery processes, and I think that's one of our key learnings is as you transform, to take that opportunity to enhance your approach.
Jonathan, as we saw in the video, you've been taking an audience-based approach to paid media.
Yeah, so audiences and data really drove our decision to bring media buying in-house. It's the audience segments that are forming the basis for creative briefs and for the strategy around media planning, and we're sharing a lot of those audiences with the airline as well. But the team's constantly looking to drive ROI through our biddable media from the value of the audience that we're targeting. From creating an audience and audience manager to targeting them in paid media channels, it's really for us about delivering an audience to the right on-site personalised experience. So we're thinking about really the entire campaign experience now from end to end, whether it be starting with an email campaign, display or social. We're really starting to think, what are we sending that audience to from a personalised experience perspective? I think, has it created a lot more content for us to manage from both a creative point of view and an on-site content point of view? But the return on media, return on investment has been worth it.
Great. And is this in parallel to the web and app content, or is it a separate workflow?
Yeah, we're treating it in parallel to web and app content at the moment. As we transition to an always-on and customer lifecycle-based approach that Simon mentioned, we're treating them in parallel at present.
Okay. And Adi, tell us about how you share audiences.
So more recently, we use Velocity audiences to drive a reward seat sale. So Ollie did touch on this in his presentation, if anyone went and saw that. So we do receive insights from Talk, and with this one, they did advise us if people transfer a large amount of points, they'll typically spend them on flights, which seems really obvious, but people can spend points on a lot of other things. So we decided to help people with that and delivered personalised redemption flight offers depending on their points balance. So we divided the data into two different audiences, those that had transferred as part of a large brand campaign that we had with Velocity, the May campaign, and those that already had a large points balance. And those that didn't have any points, we gave them a points booster message instead.
So that's great progress in 12 months, so congratulations on that. I think it's pretty impressive, right? Yeah. So let's pivot and talk about the experiences that you're delivering and specifically the content workflows. What's changed?
Yeah, so last year we actually had a large Virgin brand campaign, and as part of that we wanted to do something a bit different for our highly engaged Velocity members. We wanted to give them some personalised content, one-to-one. We also want to say thank you for being loyal and give them a compelling offer as well. We decided to flip our content process from what we knew we could deliver to what we wanted to deliver and then figure out the how later. The only thing is we had about 4 weeks to turn that around. So our agency came back with really tailored one-to-one comms, as you can see on the screen. And that was specifically about the individuals, so where they had flown the most in the last year, how many kilometres they'd travelled, how many hours they'd been in the air. And how we did this is that we had to line internally across Virgin and Velocity to make sure that everything was done correctly. Make sure that the data was available, and if it wasn't, that it could be calculated, that the different variations could fit within all the different modules in the HTML. We also had a lot of teams from an ideation perspective, offer perspective, personalisation, and of course a reporting perspective. We ended up doing, I don't know those that are used to doing some proofing within the audience, but we typically do about 5 to 10 proofs, before we launch a campaign. This one ended up having 66 rounds of proofs with 100 member data to make sure that we delivered the right data to the right person.
And what was the outcome?
The outcome was very rewarding. We ended up seeing double the open rate. We saw 6 times the average for the click-through rate. We saw over double the expected revenue return as well with the offer that we put in. We had 25% of our recipients use the social share, which wasn't optimal. We're still working on that. And we also had a lot of people asking to receive the comms, which is probably the first time in history anyone's ever asked to receive an email. So it was great.
Indeed. And it's also a great example of how we can use Adobe Campaign to rapidly test new experiences. So it gives us great flexibility to work with bespoke data sets to drive the dynamic content personalisation. And now we're taking learnings from that campaign and building out the infrastructure to enable an always-on version of the experience.
Great. So Drew, tell us about how you're moving to a cross-channel experience.
Yeah, look, obviously there's these examples kind of, opened up, kind of the media space for us. And, our recent Virgin kind of end-of-year financial sale campaign was designed as a cross-channel experience. leveraging both Virgin and Velocity's owned channels and audiences. So, you know, with that wealth of data of kind of the Velocity members, we can kind of implement a segmentation strategy focusing on that members' flying state and really tailored the content to encourage them to book. So you can see some examples there. We, you know, really kind of tailored messaging, kind of messaging about what destinations they were interested in. We retargeted the flight searches around display media with additional destination suggestions and highlighted the sale end time as it was getting closer. You know, when someone comes onto our website, you know, they're giving us so much information. They're telling us where they want to go, when they want to go. We combine that, we can kind of then bring in that offline data about their points balance and their tier and other behaviour, where we think they may want to go as well. What are the other suggestions? So this really gives us a wealth of information to work with. And that it also included a pretty robust testing strategy as well across all channels. And Audience Manager gives you that ability to kind of really kind of narrow it down and measure uplift, and we'll use that across future sales moving forward.
Okay, and Jonathan, tell us about Velocity's focus on experiences.
Yeah, it's been a really exciting time to see the release of our new digital experiences. So we've shown some on the slide here. We did the first release of our website recently. We've got 2 releases left, and we've got an Android app to follow the iOS app coming very soon as well. So it's been really exciting for us to start to see some of the fruits of digital transformation, and especially using AEM to do a lot of that.
Okay, and 2 channels and a range of different audiences. So if you can give the audience a feel for, you know, what does that look like from a content production? Is it 2 times the content, 8, 20?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's been a big increase in the amount of content for sure. So, you know, we've started thinking about transforming our resource profile to cope with that. We've invested in content writing and digital producing capability, and also using our creative and content agencies to help cover it. And an important learning for us has been, you know, to really take the time to develop the new workflows as part of a thorough change management process. It's, you know, it takes a while to really navigate that and to bed those in. A great example of it is our use of AEM experience fragments. So I was lucky enough to go to Summit in March in Vegas, and we had some real-time conversations with some of the Adobe business unit people on AEM. And we've actually been able to use experience fragments in some of the ways that we're bringing the right offer to the right person at the right time. And it's great to see that Simon and his team have done a really good job of bringing that solution to life for Velocity.
You're welcome.
Simon, tell us about how you're using experience fragments in AEM.
Sure. Well, Jonathan's team have created a beautiful feature in the new Velocity app, which helps members understand how to use the program to earn a reward. And then we're presenting individualized earning tips to help them achieve their reward goal. With hundreds of program partners and products and features within that single mobile experience, we really couldn't have picked a more difficult use case for personalization. So we were pretty relieved to hear about experience fragments, which as a feature is perfect for a content-rich brand like Velocity. So we're in the process of hooking that solution up, and we'll be releasing that very soon.
Okay, and for some of the audience who don't know what an experience fragment is, it's like a building block of components of just part of the content. So how do you organize that? Is it by campaign, or can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, in that experience, we're creating a fragment for each program or partner, product or feature, and then we create variations for each channel. So this is going to be not only in our app, but also on our website. And then we link each of those fragments to a target audience in Audience Manager that's based on an next best action model. And of course, the beauty of this is that can be all done from within Experience Manager. And what we're learning so far is that we really need to rethink roles and responsibilities in our content workflows. For example, we want our content authors to be able to create the experience fragment and target it to the audience. So a robust audience framework in Audience Manager is essential to make sure they're targeting the fragment to the right audience.
Great. So what's next for Virgin Australia and Velocity?
I'll look for us. You know, we've got to continue to ensure that we upskill our staff and our people. Team members need to be able to work across multiple Adobe products. It's hard to be siloed these days. It's difficult to find people. We're based in Brisbane. You're often competing with a range of other companies, including Adobe, for these people as well. yeah, they're tough to find. But so, you know, once we get in, they get on the tools, you know, there's training, we can get them involved. We continue to looking for opportunities to innovate in our use of the Experience Cloud. I think it's been great. We've been supported really well, and we've been able to kind of test new things and trial new things and really kind of put them through their paces. So, you know, we want to look at this. I think we've got the benefit now of this kind of dual kind of approach. If one side of the business does one thing, we can leverage that and so on. It's been really great.
And for Velocity, really, it's about operationalising our digital transformation. You know, we've worked hard on the business case, we've worked hard with our delivery partners, building the products. It's now about, you know, driving for business outcomes. I can hear the voice of my CFO in the background as I say this, even though he's not here. But, you know, I think it's fantastic to embark on digital transformation. It's good to get the money to build things, but really realising those business outcomes from a benefit realisation point is what we're at. We're at that point right now. So that's the big focus over the next 6 to 12 months. Simon?
Well, we're looking to introduce new channels in Adobe Campaign. So with the Velocity app, obviously we want to enable push notifications to be a fully integrated part of the experience for members. And we're also testing an inbound contact center capability. But really what I'm most excited about is the solution we're developing for offer management within the program, which leverages the full Experience Cloud and is based on that Experience Fragments feature.
And Adi, what's the focus for your team?
Yeah, so we're following Velocity's lead, who recently implemented Message Center. So actually this week we just went live with it ourselves. So we'll expand on that and start to migrate more things into Adobe Campaign, which leads into our sort of bigger vision where we want one hub for all of our customer communications. So Message Center will definitely help with that. Once we have everything in the one place, it will lead to better decisioning from the business, which will improve the guest experience overall.
Great. So, look, thank you very much for being so candid and sharing some of your experience. I think there's been a lot of learning. We don't have time for questions, but the team will be around if you want to grab them and you know, tackle them for more information. But thank you so much for sharing.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks much.
Alrighty, so that's great. So next, Andrew Clarke from Adobe. Over to you.
Afternoon, everyone. Hope you had a good day so far. So my job at Adobe is to work with the Experience Cloud and kind of primarily Experience Manager. So we're kind of constantly talking to customers about how they can get kind of into the experience business, and I'm sure you guys have heard the word experience quite a lot over the last couple of days. I asked a couple of people yesterday what their key takeaways from their keynotes was, and pretty much everyone said we need to learn more about experience and we need to get more into the experience business. And so taking that step back, Adobe's vision around experience is being able to you get your content out, you know, in a timely manner, so content velocity. And we also talk about fluid experiences, which is, you know, the ability to push out your content and have multiple channels consume that content. And so I'm sure you've probably heard, obviously content is going to be key to that. You can't have an experience without content. So from a content strategy and a content architecture perspective, the role of a content architect is to make sure that your content can be scalable while still kind of adhering to the requirements of the system. And you know, I'm going to try and impart some of the content strategy and the content architecture themes, and I'm going to strip back any technology, and I'm purely just going to talk about some kind of theories around how we can achieve that kind of speed and velocity. No pun intended. So you look at this, we're going to go through a couple of things. We're going to look at learning about content architecture, content strategy. We're going to talk about how the impact of the content strategist role fits into your business, and then maybe some key points on how you can get started with that content architecture journey. So to start with, we have a number of customers, and we always kind of see some common problems. And working through this list here, we talk about stale and non-compliant content. So if you don't have a good content structure or a good content strategy, you're going to find your content is sitting and residing in a number of different places over your ecosystem. So that kind of then, starts to lend itself to becoming stale. How do you maintain it? How do I change it? You don't have a single source of truth. It also leads into the ability where you don't get to harness the reusability of your content. So if you've got it written in 5 or 6 different places, then the effort for maintaining that content can be quite large. And that kind of then starts to kind of tie into, well, then you've got teams working on multiple pieces of content, but perhaps they're building out the same kind of promotion or the same type of content multiple times. So reusability is obviously a key problem we see as well. And then that kind of lends itself into maintenance and governance. If you've got multiple sources of your content, how do you apply workflow? How do you apply governance around that content? How do you make sure that legal departments are approving all of your content? What happens if you need to make a change to that content? Where do you find it? And then finally, little things like the whole lift and shift approach. A lot of content management systems and AEM as well, they have assumptions around how you consume and how you define the structure of your content. So lift and shift generally kind of don't work. You tend to kind of miss pieces of information, pieces of content as you kind of push them through the system. So you've come to these wonderful events and you've seen some fantastic presentations. You've got all energised around how you can look at all the different platforms, all the different software functionality, and then you come out of the event and you're pumped, you're ready to go, and what happens is you get back to your desk and you realise you actually can't leverage all of the platform because you haven't got your content structure in place. So I like to think of this as Jan from the legal department. She's not happy because you guys have published a campaign, published a product. She's getting a bit of heat from outside local compliance agencies around that competition or that promotion doing is not quite right. You need to change the wording. She's not happy because she needs to make that change quickly. The IT guy is copying it because he says, well, it's going to take me X amount of time because it's in multiple places. I need to do a deployment release. How do I actually get that content out quickly? So Jan's not happy. So kind of visually, you guys you've bought AEM, you've bought the whole suite, you've bought a rocket ship, and that's how you want to launch your product. That's how you want to launch your functionality. It's how you want to launch your business, and that's how you want to launch your experiences out to your customers. But realistically, if you don't have the right content structure in place, this is probably what you're looking at, this little cardboard box, and you're pretending to actually launch. And so I like it. So the idea is that without the right content strategy and the right content architecture, you kind of hamstring yourself, or you're hindering the ability to deliver those fluid and those kind of compelling experiences to your customers. So the definition of content strategy. This is the kind of stuff that you need to know, and this is the kind of stuff you need to react to, and you need to understand, and you need to work out how it applies to you and your content and your business. So content strategy, and this is an abbreviated version: right content, right user, right person, right channel, right action, right budget, right device. What else we got? To the right audience, to the right resources allocated, and then finally, now using the right type of data. So this is the kind of stuff that you need to consider when you're building out your content structure. And obviously, this kind of thing is starting to get more and more complicated as we kind of move along and understanding more data points and more touch points. It's not ideal. So your content structure, think of it as your foundation. You need to build a house, but what type of foundation? Am I building on a concrete slab, or am I building on some stilts? Content structure is going to be that foundation for how you actually build out your experiences. All right, so what is content strategy? This is the kind of thinking that we have at Adobe, and I'm sure it kind of resonates quite well with a lot of you in the room. We talk about the 4 kind of core practices, and we've got experience and content design. So this is your UX team. Maybe there's an IA in there as well. Content architecture. We have content marketing, and we have editorial and brand strategy. What this really looks like, probably these days, is something more along the lines of this. So think of the experience and content design box being somewhere where you've got a mix of UI and you've got an IA, an information architect, sitting in that role as well. Realistically, an information architect should probably be separated or decoupled from presentation. And then we have the content marketing and the editorial and brand strategy. And those two teams tend to kind of merge and sit together and become their own kind of practice in that kind of content strategy practice. And the greyed out box is the content architecture. There's a reason why it's grey, and it's probably because it's slightly off-brand. Mark, close your ears, from Adobe. The content architect is someone who doesn't necessarily care about delighting the end user in the experience. The content architect's role is to make sure that it's building scalable content for the people using the system so they can deliver the delightful experiences. That's why it's great. So this is the good diagram. This is the good stuff. So think of this Venn diagram here. We look at content architecture in the top right. We look at experience on the left. And then we look at the editorial and then the content marketing. So what you should look, the way you kind of interpret this diagram is that each one of those quadrants has a relationship with each other. And all of those relationships make sense. So from a content architectural perspective, if you think of my relationship with the experience and content design team, I'm really interested in what type of structure of content that I need to provide to that experience team. From a relationship between my content architect down to the content marketing team, I'm interested in knowing what type of content I need to provide them and what type of systems the data or the content's coming from or going to. So the marketing team are going to be using a number of different systems. So how do I get that content to them in a speed or in a kind of scalable manner? I don't necessarily care that much about how it's being communicated, and that's the editorial strategy. But if you look at the relationship between the content marketer and the editorial strategist, they need to have a good kind of relationship. And the same with the UX and the editorial. So the UX are going to be providing the mechanism for delivering those experiences. And if we build that out, these are the kind of roles that you would see in each one of these groups. There's a really interesting one. If you look up at the top right, the content architecture one. If anyone was in the taxonomy and metadata talk this morning with a guy from Dell, I was speaking to him yesterday, and he was running through the workflow for managing their content and understanding their metadata. And he was talking about, as part of their process, when they ingest an asset into the system, or into AEM, part of the workflow step is actually go to someone in their library, and that librarian has to validate that all of the content, all of the metadata associated to that asset applies to their policies and procedures and their governance rules. If it doesn't, it gets flicked back to the person who's uploaded that asset. And the content strategy person, kind of sitting in the middle, realistically is probably going to be doing a lot of different roles. You generally find that someone's stronger in one particular area than the other, but they do cross over. You're not going to get someone specifically designed to sit in each one of those roles. But in an organisation where you want to structure that kind of group, well, this is the kind of diagram that can help you out. So lastly, the part of this one as well is we haven't talked about technology. So from a technology perspective, you need to include them. They need to be involved as part of the content architecture and strategy, because the technology guys are going to understand what type of data is getting pushed between different systems, what the structure of that data is, how to get it in and out. They also need to have an influence over the UX to a certain point, because the data that they're going to provide you is going to help reflect your kind of user experience. And once again, anyone who's actually touching, for example, the experience guys, if they're doing stuff on their page design and they're implying particular rules and behaviours and assuming certain types of data, then they effectively have a role in that content architecture. So, how do we define content architecture? This is kind of how it started and how it's going to come about. We look at the information architects. Primarily they were there to design websites. They worked out the structure. They looked at SEO. They looked at metadata. It's still a valid role and it's still happening today. But it needs to evolve a little bit further. So from a content architecture perspective, they take what an IA or a content, like someone who's building wireframes, and they add on to it. They need to know how to structure the content. As a content architect, I need to understand the authoring model. I need to know who's doing what, how many times content or assets are being changed or ingested in the system, how they're being produced, how they need to be exposed. I need to know the workflow. I also need to know, are there any localization requirements for my content? And all of this information goes around how you define your content structure. I need to know how that content's going to be reused. Is it going to be visually reused through an app? Is the content going to be used in a chatbot, or are we going to use it through Alexa, for example? I need to understand, does that content need to be personalised? How's it going to be personalised? Permissions and access levels is a key one here as well. So being able to understand who needs access to that content and what type of authorization they need to access that is very important. So if you think about content APIs or headless CMS or hybrid CMSs, they're all driven through non-visual APIs. So how do I actually define who gets access to what type of content? So building out your content structure, your right folder structure, you're defining your permission levels is very important. Obviously, governance, maintenance, integration requirements, and alignment to your platforms, key to that. So if you think about this is a kind of key slide for me. If you can summarise it all up, content architecture is starability. What I mean by that, and by the way, this was a reference to one of our technical architects in the US. Kind of this is his definition of content architecture. So I had to give him a reference down there just in case he saw the video. But think of it this way: findability, usability, scalability, reusability, and flexibility. Unfortunately, spell check changed it from an A to an I. It would have been nice to have the A in flexibility, but what can you do? So findability. If you can't find the content, why write it? Why, what's the point of actually producing it? If you can't find it, you can't produce it, and it's not usable, there's no point in actually writing the content. It needs to be scalable. So we talked about multiple touch points, designing for speed, designing for scale, designing for different multiple touch points, different channels. If it's not reusable, there's another problem. So it needs to be reusable. You need to be able to write that sentence once and reuse it across multiple channels. I'd much rather do that than having to go and edit that sentence in 5 or 6 different spots. And by the way, that sentence is sitting inside AEM as a content fragment inside assets. So we like to treat content as an asset, just as much as we'd like to treat images as an asset or videos as an asset. And flexibility, we need to be able to use that content once again across those multiple channels. So whether that sentence is being delivered in an app as a push notification, or whether it's being delivered as an audio message, or even through a chatbot. So, wrapping up, what can you do? How do you get ready for content architecture? First of all, I think you need to sit down with your teams and your departments and work out what kind of goals are you trying to get out of the system and out of your platform? So understanding where you want to go is key. Establishing a group of, I guess what we called, people who are key to all of those different quadrants within that diagram previously. They're your go-to people. So if you need to make a change to metadata within the system, you need to understand, who do I speak to make that change? And what's the impact of that change? That impact could be upstream, or it could be downstream. So upstream, I mean, if I make a change to a metadata property within my content, upstream, how's it going to be displayed on the web? How's it going to be displayed on the mobile app? You need to understand the ramifications of that. Once again, there's also downstream if I make a change to my metadata. Downstream, if my internal systems are expecting specific properties or specific types of content to come through, and you've changed that somewhere, how does that impact? So setting up a group who understands all of that is, once again, pretty important. Auditing your content, sitting down and actually working out where your content's coming from, who's consuming it, where it's being used, what applications are using it and how it's being used, obviously key. The next one, identifying systems using the content and metadata. So if you think about metadata, how your taxonomy works. Maybe you've decided to, you might have a lot of different tags that are redundant or very similar to each other. So understanding and auditing your taxonomy rules and vocab is pretty important. And so just to finalise on that, you set up some cross-functional groups across the quadrant who understands all the different ramifications. Understanding your governance structure. Obviously, you can have different levels of governance. So each one of those governance levels may have different requirements. And at the end of the day, you can jump into AEM and start testing these hierarchies quite easily. So once you've got your content structure in place, and you're happy with that, then maybe Jan's a little bit more receptive. She's a little bit more happy. I tried to find a picture of her with a thumbs up, but I couldn't. That's the best I could do. So Jan's happy. She's a little bit more open. She's been involved in the process of understanding your content structure. She's bought into the whole system, and she's a lawyer, so that's a happy lawyer right there. Okay. Sorry, my wife's a lawyer, so it's all right. And so, Mark, that's it from me.